Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Turnkey Insider. Welcome. See a few of you popped in here a bit early. I do expect some people to keep straggling in. So before we get started, I just want to do a quick mic check. Please type a 1 in the questions box if you can hear me loud and clear. All right, excellent, excellent. Thank you, everyone. All right, before we get started, while we wait for some of our other members to come in, just want to go over the goal of this is to basically answer any questions you guys have. So it is an open Q&A session. Feel free to throw out your questions throughout the class. We'll run for about 50 minutes. And then I'll just go over some basic tips, clarify some of the rules or money management strategy if you guys have any questions on that. So I really do encourage questions with this since it is pretty new. Ah, yes, and someone reminded me of the rollover. But since it is fairly new, well, as far as releases go, I'm still kind of finding out where everyone is with the software and what I should focus on. I do try to focus on things that were helpful to me as I was learning the system, but I do want to kind of zero in on where everyone is at so that we can make this an effective class for you guys. Let me just roll over to the new contract. Someone reminded me. And of course, we have our disclaimer here. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. Standard disclaimer, we'll be looking at historical examples. We may look at a live trade setup if one happens in real time. I'd be more than happy to. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Most basically, historical examples do have limited use, but they are useful for educational value. So we'll go ahead and close that. All right, so we do have a bounce developing, a bounce trade. So if no one is, and this would be a textbook bounce trade. So our rules for the bounce is we want to see a turn bar, which I anticipate this one to be. So looks like we passed that threshold. Give me 1 second here. Let me just bring my rules over here for everyone. Kind of minimize these. I don't need those so large. All right, so let me just go over my rules for a short bounce. The bar that is forming will turn gold, and this won't happen until at least we hit the orange line. So you may see a gold outline, but since we're looking for a turn bar, which basically means we need to go to the completely opposite DPI of the current trend. So since the bars are moving along, we need to see this reverse completely. The bar background color is red, which it is not at the moment, and that's because our yellow line creeped above 0. So we're outside of the realm of our bounce trade. But I just want to go over this for an example. We have our white signal line below the orange trigger line, and these are both below the 200 EMA. And the 200 EMA was plotting red as well. It does have a little smidgen of green in there. And next, the yellow line down here in our direction ribbon needs to be below 0. Now, the absolute sweet spot for these trades is between 0 and 25. So I really like this pattern, which we'll see. If we had a turn bar within these last couple of bars, it would have been a really excellent bounce trade. We have our yellow line coming from an extreme or outside of our negative 100 range. It comes in, and then we want to see this kind of pattern. We have a turn bar, the bars go up, and we see our yellow line kind of following suit. And then the absolute best ones are where the yellow line kind of just skims off the 0 line and reverses. Looks almost like a horseshoe. And for that to be the case, we would need to see a turn bar. So we need to see this come all the way down to the opposite DPI. So unfortunately, that didn't happen. Markets are still fairly slow, so not too many opportunities just yet. Same with our in-house traders have been kind of dealing with the same thing. They're just, markets haven't been super busy yet, so I think we're kind of coming out of August. Hopefully in the next 1 to 2 weeks, those opportunities will pick back up. So there have been a few, but not what we're normally used to seeing with this system. So typically on a normal day, I would usually see about 2 to 3 really prime, just textbook cream of the crop examples of trade setups on any given market. So Susanna asks, how do you draw the pink line at 60? So I added some lines down here. I think they're helpful, especially to illustrate when we're talking about extremes or certain ranges. So this is just a constant line indicator. So it's a standard indicator. You just come to your indicators list, select constant lines. So I have mine entered down here. And then there's actually 4 line values you can set. So I did a 100, negative 100, and 60, negative 60. And then you can just color code them whatever you like and adjust the thickness and line style. So I just have the dash dot and a thickness of 4 for the 100 and 3 for the 60. You may want to adjust that. But I do find it's helpful specifically for the 100 line, as I really like to know when the yellow line comes out of this range. It's a very powerful thing to know and can give us a good heads up of what we should be looking out for, what we maybe shouldn't. So one thing I do want to point out is the importance of coming from extremes. So, and as you get more familiar with the system, I'm sure this is what you'll be wanting to look out for. It really helped me zero in on some really prime setups. And it goes for trend trades or bounce trades. And more specifically, the bounce trade. This, I mean, when we come from an extreme and it skims off the 0 line, it's a very, very powerful setup. David is asking if this is a trend trade at 10:10. It technically is, but the yellow line isn't coming from an extreme. I wouldn't be too eager to take this one because the morning kind of starts out choppy. This is what I like to look out for when determining chop with Turnkey Trader. is my yellow line is just kind of bouncing around here in between the 25s. It's not really going to extremes. There's not really any strong sign of a trend. So I would pass this one up. It was just after news, but we did pass this one up in the office, mainly for that reason. It didn't come from an extreme. Um, so when they don't come from an extreme, they are a bit more risky. So I don't like to um, risk my stop. When it's a bit too risky, the trend hasn't really been established very long. What I would like to see is this reverse, and then on this next trend, that's when I would be more eager to hop in a trend trade. So we'd probably go about, I don't know, 5 or 6 bars, let my yellow line get outside of the 25 range, and then wait for one of my bars to retrace, hit my orange trigger line. And then look to enter as the bar retraced using the appropriate DPI. So if we're heading short, we want to use the red DPI price. Suzanne is asking, indication of long gold tail, risky to enter long. Yeah, well, and we don't only want to look at the bars, we want to look at what the other indicators are telling us. So we have our red background, all of our EMAs here are trending short. So we're not really going to look to enter a long trade in this situation. Our ribbon, our brackets and ribbon are both trending short as well. So not really a situation we'd be looking to enter any type of long trade. So these bars are rather large, and that's kind of what they're designed to do. So we want to see a lot of retracement and just kind of a back and forth between the buyers and sellers. You'd normally see a lot of chop on a different type of chart with a smaller bar. We want to let that all work itself out in one bar, and then if the market continues back in our anticipated direction, that's when we want to get back in, because one side is going to get exhausted. So if there's a lot of buyers trying to push the price up and they end up losing out, they just kind of run out of steam. That's when we want to look back in, because we're anticipating that all the sellers are going to hop in and push the price down. Or Susanna's asking, risky to enter short. Well, that really depends on what the setup looks like. So a long tail in either direction isn't really a warning sign. And if I start seeing a lot of pullback in a row, I'm a little more wary, but I do have a stop that will ride over all these. So it's not out of the question to enter these trades, because we do have a rather large stop that's designed specifically to ride over a lot of that pullback that might pop up. Yeah, just give me a second here, guys. James is asking about the CL with a buy signal. I don't see a buy signal in the CL here. So CL, CL is one of those markets with this that I don't watch too often just because it's been fairly choppy more often than not. I mean, it does have some good days, but I think over um, it may be one that I'll have up to watch, but I wouldn't expect to get a trade signal in the CL every day. It just hasn't been moving a ton. I don't know what time is that. Was that buy signal at, James? I'm just not seeing it on this chart here. I mean, this is this morning, so there's not really a buy signal from market open. Um, all right, if you give me a time in Eastern time, I can take a look at that, but I don't really see anything popping up there. So unfortunately, a rather slow day here. Um, Not out of the ordinary for a Friday. Not really any signals in the RTY here. Oh, Susanna's asking about I'm taking it you mean the NQ bounce will be going short and doesn't matter, the brackets need to be read as well. For the bounce, it does not need to be read, but keep in mind that our zero line, or our yellow line here is above zero. So that's going to disqualify the bounce short. So if we take a look at our rules here, the turnkey direction ribbon's yellow line is lower than zero. So since we're heading short, we need it to be on the negative side. And it did just creep above there. And it's at about 15 right now. So this is not going to be a bounce, but to answer your question regarding the bracket doesn't have to coincide with the bounce trade. We actually don't really look at the bracket at all with the bounce trade. So I would like to see this bar plot, and then within 5 or 6 bars, however long it takes for my yellow line to get outside of this 25 range, that's when I'd start to look for a trend trade if I got enough pullback for the bars to hit my orange trigger line. So, and this is another helpful tidbit that really helped me be able to watch multiple charts rather easily, is that none of our trades are going to qualify unless they cross or touch the orange line at some point. So the trend trade needs to retrace back to the orange trigger line to qualify. That's one of the rules. And the bounce, bracket, or counter trade, since they're reversal type trades, they will qualify on a turn bar. They're going to have to cross through the orange line. So something it really helps me to know that I don't really have to even consider qualifying a trade until that orange line is touched by one of the tails. David's asking, what is the sweet spot for trend trade between 60 to 100? Yeah, I really like it between 60 and 100, and depending if the trend's been strong as well, we have all red bars, a red background. We're going to have a little bit of black area here, but if we continue trending short, we're going to get right back to our red background. So we'll see an overall good short trend here. So I'll even hop in once it's outside of the 25 range. But for the most part, I do like it between 60 and 100. So another thing with the trend trades, let me find there's a good example in the NQ yesterday. Yeah, here we go. Was that it? It may have been on the other contract. This doesn't look exactly the same. Oh no, here it is. Yep. So well, yesterday while this during the live market, I don't think it kept the gold bar since this is the new contract, but I was on the 0917 yesterday, and this bar triggered a trend trade. So it did come from an extreme. Between 60 and 100, do have everything lined up, but notice that we didn't get everything in a really strong trend until a few bars before. Did have a rather long tail that we could barely ride out using the opposite DPI as our stop, but still a very white knuckle situation there. So something to look for, as we discussed in this current example, where I want to see some red bars and a consistent short trend, that when these runs, we had our reversal, so we're reversing from our short trend here. Then we have a bunch of gray bars, which simply tells us that our white line is out of order from our orange line for the direction we want to go. So those don't cross till about here. Then we start getting our green bars. So we want to have all indications that we have a really strong, consistent trend before we enter a trend trade. We got all these kind of wrapped around, crisscrossing like spaghetti here, getting in order when we really want to see that established for a while. And not to mention, this was pretty late in the day. This trade actually this bar took over about 2 hours to work its way out, and it did eventually hit profit target, but it was a rather risky trade entry. So something to keep in mind for the strongest trend trade setups. We want to see at least that run start with our red bars and preferably a red background, but that might not always happen. You do get little situations like these where there's a little out of order, and then they eventually reestablish. And our yellow line has to, it might dip above the 0 here and there. This line, I add this just to put it right about market open. So which is actually right about here on this bar. I add that. That's just a F7. That's a drawing tool. The actual daybreak is back here. That should be on default on your chart. So all right, let's see what else we got cooking up. If we have any other good examples of trades. Unfortunately, it's been, like I said, a pretty slow week, so there hasn't been a ton going on. So here we did have, this would be a little bit of a riskier trend trade. Again, we had our gray bars here starting out this run, kind of get established here. Almost came from an extreme. Sometimes I am tempted to fudge this, but I find anytime I do, it'll eventually come back to bite me. So I like to wait until this gets to at least 100. I will fudge that a little bit if it's just been constantly long all day. That's when, if it goes to 80, 90, something like that, I'm a little more lenient, but Suzanne is asking, what is the difference between gold bracket candle versus the one with long gold tail? So if you have the trade marker activated, uh, that is the indicator that will mark the trades. So it can't do it live just due to the nature of some of these indicators that we can't calculate live. So it is a useful training tool as it will plot a qualified trade once that bar closes. So, but you shouldn't rely on it to enter trades. Otherwise, you'd have to attempt to do retracement entries. But it is helpful as you're studying and learning the system. So, and Scott's asking about the blue wick versus the gold wick. So a gold wick will basically tell us that we have a qualified, or is one of the things we need to look for a qualified trade. So if we have a blue wick, that's basically telling us that it's not going to be a qualified trade, most simply. So David is asking if the turnkey trader brackets should be set on bar close. I actually don't recall off the top of my head. Calculate on bar close to true. Yes. So on the YM here, I'd actually be looking for possibly a bounce. If the market reverses a bit, it could just, go back up and continue on. But right here, our yellow, we're pretty close to extremes, and when it gets that bloated, I'm pretty worried about it running out of steam. Sometimes the YM is an odd man out because those days where it hits highs, it just keeps running and running, and unfortunately, we may not get entries into those. But I don't like to push it or bend the rules to try to hop in a run. Because eventually that's going to come back and bite me. So. All right. About that, just had to send a quick message there. All right. Let's see what else we got cooking up. Let's see if I can find any good bounce examples. There just haven't been a ton. There we go. That's a pretty prime bounce example. I'm not sure if this happened during news. We have a pretty decent long or short trend since the start of the day. Get a bit of a reversal, comes up, kind of bounces off the 200, goes a little bit through, but since these bars are so long, that's fine with me because our entry's way down here. So I'm not worried about chop if we hit my entry price for a bounce trade. So I actually do like to see it bounce off the 200. That's an extra qualifier for me. Kind of increases the strength of the trade. So this one looks like we would have hit our profit target of 6 ticks, and then this one probably would have stopped us out. And sometimes that's going to happen. Um, so for the money management strategy, if you've looked on the ATM on the site, we do recommend the adjusting to break even, of course, with your runner. Um, and that is the most conservative approach. I find that I like to adjust mine to break even -2. That works for me. I know some traders who, and it's not really unique to this system, break even -3 or 4. And you will give up some ticks once in a while, but it does give you good odds to uh, take part in runners more often. So I've still caught plenty of runners at break even or even break even +1. Um, Sometimes when these trades trigger and you get filled and they just take off and then you get to the point you can start trailing. Um, I like waiting until I can trail at the orange line. The white signal line is also a good trail. So you do have to wait a bit longer to trail at the orange line. But sometimes it's worth it. You can ride out, uh, a lot of these tails. These ones kind of come up. These ones particularly do hit the orange line. But for the most part, I find that trailing at the orange line lets you ride that run for quite a while. David asks, do you like to take 20 on the runner and get out? Yeah, so that's the one in the ATM video. And I actually really like that strategy for starting out. I think it's an excellent strategy. It works well in most markets. You grab a quick, I mean, if it's in the NQ, you grab 5 points, which is an extra $100. And it's a way to get consistent profit um, instead of waiting to the point where the orange line or the white line gets better than break even and trailing there. Now, doing that, of course, on the flip side of that, we do eliminate our chance for a runner. So, optionally, you can leave your third contract in as a runner, leave it at your break even or break even -2. And then once the market goes 20 ticks, you can just decide if you want to try to trail it or just jump out at 20, 21, whatever. That way you have the option to do both. But for the ATM, I actually really like that. Setting, and I use it for starting out. And then when you get to the point where you move up to 4 contracts, is what I really like because you can do. You still have your 2 contracts at our initial profit target. We can take a third contract off at 20 ticks, and then we still have that 4th contract for the runner. So that's really, in my eyes, the prime money management strategy. That's extremely effective because even if we give ourselves an opportunity to catch a runner, but we also go for that 20 ticks. So I mean, sometimes it's just going to retrace real quick and we'll get stopped out, but that strategy has served me well since I started using the system. Ed's asking on um, the CL, the orange trigger line seems to follow closer than the white line. Yeah, it does seem to do that, which doesn't actually look right, but And it's, the CL is just one of those markets that I don't really find to be super effective with this system. I haven't seen a ton of trades with it. Uh, so, I mean, certainly you'll find some trade setups here and there, but the NQ and EMD are much more effective. You'll see many more trade setups in there, and it's really just, CL's been fairly slow lately, so there will be that odd day where you'll catch some good moves, but even when those days are moving, I don't find it effective with um, Turnkey Trader. I just don't see enough trade opportunities for it to be super worthwhile to be like a prime market to watch. So, and same thing with like a market like the ES. It moves, it doesn't move a ton. You may see a trade in the ES with Turnkey Trader once in a while, but it's not really going to be, so it's one of those, if you want to keep a market or a chart open on the side or a small corner of the screen or something, that would be probably the ideal, just because those markets don't really seem to move really enough to establish the kind of trends we want to see to hop in. So, and that's really, what this system is designed to do is basically just look for these really nice trends and hop in here and let, we have these long bars so we can let the market work itself out, let the buyers and sellers argue a bit, and then if it lines up for us, we want to hop in when that move continues. Susanna is asking about the NQ, if there is a possible trade setup. I would actually like to see this yellow line get out of this 25 range. Probably a little more, but we would need to see a bar retrace up here anyhow. And my white and yellow orange line looks like they're just out of order, so which is kind of odd. Got a little pullback pushing them out of order, just barely. So that might not be enough to really matter, but remember, for our trend trade, we still do need to see this retrace and hit my orange trigger line. So at this point, I wouldn't enter short, plus this is going to be a gray bar. So I'd probably avoid that one. If it went 2 more bars, I would likely hop in there. Just do a quick reload here, see if that straightens out. Yeah, so I'm going to see it go a couple more bars and have my yellow line get outside of this range. Yeah, there we go. So would need to see red bars though. So TF or RTY is also a pretty good market, even though they've been kind of slow. Volume's still kind of split between them. I think a lot of people hopped back on the TF after August. I did see a lot of volume on the RTY the last couple weeks of August. And I know more people will be moving over there. moving forward, but keep in mind that the TF is still going to be on the ICE exchange until June of next year. So they're probably both going to be back and forth or split volume for a while. So, but they still do present quite a few opportunities. So this one, unfortunately, I wouldn't really look to enter a bounce on this one, as my yellow line is still above 100. So we just came from an extreme. We're way up here at like 123 or so, 118, and then I'm still right at about 100. So I really like to see that pattern we were talking about, where we get enough of a reversal, my yellow line dips down below here. So just keep an eye out for that pattern, and it will really serve you well waiting for those cream of the crop setups there. And give me 1 second here. Let me update the chart. Okay. Another market that I like particularly with Turnkey Trader, I know some trade it, is the FDAX. So if you're up early in the morning, pre-US market, it's been a pretty good market. So I like it. Going for 6 ticks. You do have to be wary of chop. And there's a few different things to look out for with Turnkey Trader when we're looking for chop. One of them is the yellow line just bouncing back and forth between the 25s. And also, once I rope around the EMAs a couple times, especially the 200, I like to call it a zipper pattern. That kind of causes, I want to wait for a trend to reestablish. So, but also a good market. I like it. I like to trade it in the morning. I come in about an hour before work sometimes, and usually it presents me with at least one decent trade opportunity, the bounces specifically in the FDAX. So, all right, everyone, we got about 8 minutes. I do have to cut this one at 50 minutes. So I have another training after this. So now would be a good time for any last minute questions, anything that's maybe popped up since you started with this, or you're still a little not clear on. Now would be the best time. A lot of excellent questions. Kind of gives me a frame of reference of where to steer these trainings in the future. So again, the major takeaway, and I'll probably hound on this pretty consistently, but that's because it is very important, is coming from extremes. So, you know, especially for the bounces and the trends, that'll really qualify your trades much more strongly. Looking for this kind of bounce pattern. Of course, we want the yellow line to stick in, but we don't really have another decent example. There was that one in the EMD. Oh, Jeff, nope. Sorry about that. Is there still an issue with the email timer? All right, I thought we fixed that last week. We'll have to take a look at that. But yes, I can send you a recording. It was recorded. So if anyone is just hopping in now or got the email late, just shoot a reminder email to me at support, and I'll go ahead and send you the link for the class. So I do record all these in case anyone misses it. So, But again, and especially with the bounce trades, I really want everyone just to burn that pattern into your mind. Um, Similar to this, bouncing off the 200 is also a strong extra qualifier with these bounce trades. It doesn't have to exactly bounce off the 200. So something like this looks pretty good. And the reason it doesn't have to bounce exactly off the 200, like I don't need to see the top of the bar be right on top of the 200 or right underneath it, is, these bars are so large, our entry is so far away from the 200, but it's still a good signal that we're moving away. We moved past or away from that point of support or resistance, and probably going to continue in that direction if all of our other indicators line up. David's asking, what do we consider an extreme? Anything outside of 100. So 100 is kind of like the first extreme level, and then 125, which is this other dash line here, or 120, I'm sorry. That's the extreme, if you will. But once it gets to and even once a trend trade gets to, past 100, I'm a little skeptical of it, and certainly past 120 for sure. So it really depends on how strong the trend has been. Ronald, all right. This is Leah. Give me time. We'll find a spot likely in the video center. I'll go ahead and post these on the video center later this afternoon for anyone who missed it. So that way you guys don't have to send me emails. We'll go ahead and pop them in here toward the end of the day. So I'll throw last week's and today's in here. It'll probably be later this afternoon after my other training session. And of course, if you guys feel or have any suggestions or feedback for this training, something you'd like to see it focus on a bit more, I know that so it is fairly new as far as it being released officially. So I've been using it for quite a while. So I can share things that I've learned that have really helped me as I've been using it, but it does help me also kind of zero in on where the class needs to focus if I get feedback from you guys on where you guys are at with your initial experience with Turnkey Trader. So I know it's been kind of slow, and we're experiencing the same thing here. And what I say to that is just don't get impatient. Don't take trades just to take trades. This is really a system where it's very slow and steady, and we want to wait for the very best of the best setups. And during more normal market days, we look to hop in on a bounce and hopefully ride it out as long as we can. Sometimes we get some pullback like this that just kicks us out. It's going to happen, but doing it consistently, we will catch those runners. And ideally, this would be like a one and done trade per market per day. So something else I would also mention is that if I've had one trade in a trend, I may take two trades. So like a bounce, if I have a bounce trade, and then a bit later I have a trend trade, and that'll be my limit. So I don't look to get into every trend trade that pops in on the run, because eventually we get to this extreme level, everything kind of flattens out. While it very well could continue, but if we make a habit of that, we're eventually going to come to the point And it may not be that same run or that day. But eventually entering a trend trade when we're at this level, everything is just kind of flat, bloated past the extreme. Um, it's going to come back to bite us because these trends do stop eventually. And we don't know when the end is going to be. This kind of gives us a heads up when it's no longer safe to enter, or it's just much too risky. So I do these sessions Fridays at 8 a.m. It looks like a few of you may be getting the emails a bit late, so I'll have to take a look at that and get that sorted out for you guys. Do apologize, but we will post the recordings up later this afternoon, as I said, in the video center on the Turnkey Trader members website at members.turnkeytrader.com. And we'll definitely get that email issue sorted out for you guys next week so everyone gets it in time. And you should also be receiving one 24 hours in advance. May not be the case. I know sometimes those slip by us. So we'll get that sorted out for you guys. Again, I do apologize. All right, looks like we are down to the end. So thank you for joining, everyone. I hope we were able to answer some of your questions. And again, if any more questions pop up, feel free to shoot us an email to support. If you have any feedback or suggestions for this class, things you would like to see covered, it does help me present a more wide or well-rounded class for you guys, because this is really for you. We want everyone to have a thorough understanding and use this strategy effectively. So, and again, patience is key. We don't want to get in the habit of taking trades just because nothing has been going on. It has been rather slow lately, so we're all in that same boat. We're having the same thing in the office here. So hopefully within the next week or so, we'll return to kind of normal markets and get a bit more movement. But again, just stick to the rules, pay attention to your extremes, and you guys will be all right. All right. Again, thank you everyone for joining me. I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. Hope the rest of the trading day treats you well. And until next week, happy trading.